Delicate subject. Chapter 9. The next day began like a reasonably normal day. She woke up alone and spent some time catching up on work. Most people were off the ship taking advantage of shore leave. The only disruption came from entering into the crew deck and seeing a series of poster prints up on the hallway walls of her interlude with Thane from yesterday. She stopped and looked at them critically. Thane was definitely unspeakably attractive in his green pants. Most of the shots were from the back and above, so nice ass. There were a few from the front and above, her face with concentration and, yes, looking at him as though he set the stars in their paths. It was a tasteful series of photographs, a few final spots on the wall left distinctly open. It was an obviously unfinished series. She wondered if it had once been finished and otherwise torn down by other hands. She was going to leave them there and drop it, just to be contrary. Unless she could get copies. Pranking on military vessels could get vicious, and this was kind of cute in comparison. She had the best crew. She wandered up to the CIC and stood next to Joka until he couldn't stand it. She waited, arms crossed. He glanced at her, then back forward. She told him, "Joka, we're docked. You're not looking at anything." He grinned. "That's right. I didn't see anything at all." She gestured for him to get it out of his system. "Don't get me wrong, Commander. I don't know anybody who isn't happy for you. Jealous as hell, but happy for you. Those who can manage that. Okay, I don't know anybody who isn't jealous as hell." "I am not jealous, Jeff." "Anybody. As in you'd have to have one to qualify." "Whoa, harsh. Edie, your attitude is fine. I am not jealous, but I am curious." Uh-oh. "All right. Ask." "From what I understand in popular media, jealous as hell seems to be a common response, but Garrus was not jealous." He was too busy trying to wrangle an enthusiastic Krogan. There were threats and one full-body check. How in hell did word get around so fast? Well, Jack has figured out when Thane tends to work out. She cruises by to check often, from what I understand. She let Kelly and Kasumi know. It being shore leave and several people on this vessel having no actual job unless there's something to shoot, there was a small crowd before you even arrived. After you got there, a bigger crowd. By the time it was a sporting event, it was really too late. We're lucky there was decent soundproofing. It got loud. Mostly supportive. I think Thane knew. He had the angles figured out. We didn't see much but his ass. At least that made Jack happy. Simultaneously jealous as hell, of course. Of course. To answer your question, Edie, no, Garrus was not jealous. There was no need. He might have been sorry he hadn't thought of it, but Taurians have multiple partners at his stage of life. Search for girl in every port in military tradition. Search infidelity as a separate group of incidents. Done. Searching on those subjects and not the entertainment versions will give you a different set of statistics. Entertainment can be idealized, reflecting and reinforcing social mores. Having multiple partners in multiple locations has been a historical military tradition. Infidelity is high enough in historical record to estimate that up to 60% of married humans have been unfaithful. A large percentage of the population opts to stay single. Marriage rates had been in a long decline even before the discovery of Mass Effect relays, and then declined sharply afterwards. most likely due to changes in religious and social habits brought about by mobilization and cross-culture blending after global travel became the norm, and then the proven existence of other ways to function through meeting other species. It is possible that the majority of humans have been polyamorous throughout history. I think monogamy can bring a comforting, romantic sense that someone belongs to you and their behavior can be controlled. There are obviously people who are happy and monogamous, but it can also end up with unhappy people who have lost the spark in the relationship and are now trapped by bonds that were once comforting and romantic, but became progressively more restrictive. Living in a domestic two-person household can create and strengthen shared exclusive experience, resulting in a very close pair bond. I do not wish to own another person or be owned, nor do I wish to control behavior or have mine controlled. If someone chooses to spend their time with me free of obligation, that's of more value to me than having someone forced to spend time with me due to an outdated agreement that was once comforting. That is what I offered to Garrus and Thane, with both knowing I may choose other partners in the future. Choosing a new partner, though, does not mean I would end my other relationships. I could still have a lifelong relationship with both of them for as long as our lives last, which admittedly may not be long, but we're working on that. They are also free to choose other partners and to discontinue a relationship with me at will and still remain close friends. I did not lie to them, so there is no question of betrayed trust. Joker rolled his eyes. Like they're gonna turn you down. Jane quirked a smile. You'd be surprised. Thane did turn me down at first. Would you accept those terms, Jeff? You scare the crap out of me, and my answer would be a massively intimidated no. See? Negotiations don't always work out. Edie, our commander is point-blank blast radius gorgeous. Take it from me. She doesn't hear no often. If she does, it's maybe because some people are instinctively terrified of a Taurian with an anger stick up his ass and a Drell assassin who might want more time with her. Did you order them to sleep with you? Joker snickered. No ordering. Polite requesting. Part of the not eliciting jealousy or violence would have to come from honest negotiation of the relationship and not employing coercion. We are all able to separate command situations from personal situations. Mostly, so our personal lives don't interfere with our jobs. Mostly. In my earlier life, I borrowed from the military tradition of girl in every port by branching out and having possibly a few girls and a few boys of different ethnicities and species in every port. Since there was no fraternizing in the alliance, I had to find my partners elsewhere anyway. This is a special circumstance, and I've happily taken advantage. Historically, good reasons for monogamy would be for the male to be assured that the woman and the children he was providing for and protecting were exclusively his own. I have no need to be financially supported or socially protected, no pregnancy where I'm more vulnerable, and no children. But Thane and Garrus do protect you. They prioritize protecting you over protecting others, even themselves. Review of combat recordings show this clearly. That's true. I will tell you that if I had to choose between people who did not care about me and people who did care about me at my back, I prefer caring. But they would also protect other members of the team with their lives, or they wouldn't qualify to be on the team. I also protect them in return. It's a service we provide to each other, creating a synergy. They both demonstrated this long before we became involved. It might have been a factor of me choosing to be involved with them. That might be part of what makes them attractive to me. They have both informed me I had better take care what orders I give. I also accept that because if they were forced to save my life at the cost of their own, or to countermand my orders due to poor decision-making on my part, That would not be my preferred outcome. They challenge me, as well as back me up. When the Great Mutiny of 85 hits, I want to be on the right side. Oh, come on, Joker. You know you're my guy. You're the only person it's been proven I'd die for. Did you and Jeff sleep together? Is that what inspired you to save him? This is getting a little too weird. Even for me. No, he's just that important. Edie searched for Captain Goes Down with the Ship and realized that it was her job, and I was a dumbass. We're used to that, sweetie. You're mean sometimes, Commander. She shrugged. Got a smile for the cameras. They seem to be everywhere. It was shore leave, but she was for once pretty damn relaxed, and felt like getting more work done. The whole lack of scandal had been a distraction that cleansed her mind of Reapers temporarily. She was able to get back to them with a fresh mind. She was handling smaller concerns, requests for information vetted through Garrus to pass along to Palaven, cautious feelers from Liara on a number of subjects. Liara had started to forward what the previous Shadow Broker had done on the subject of indoctrination, a huge chunk of info to sort through, with more coming in. She'd seen the dragon's teeth at Eden Prime firsthand. She pulled up images of dragon's teeth and images of what she knew came from them. Humans turned into husks. So start with what seemed impossible, but you know to be true. Human. Skewered. Husk. Scrolling through pictures of husks, it seemed like the hole from being impaled was sealed mechanically. Tubes and plates and wires, metallic components, bioluminescence. She flipped through the pictures, spread them out on her desk, stood and walked once around the room, tossed her ball, came back to look at them, repeated this cycle a few times. Husks looked identical. Hair gone, no breasts, no gender characteristics other than a vaguely male body shape in the shoulders and hips. So they weren't turned, they were templated. She pulled up a bunch of pictures of husks from different angles and missions. All the same. Were nanobots used to construct them? Utilizing biological fuel and material to create a rabid foot soldier with simple instructions? They had no verbal capacity, no strategy. They found life, they attacked life. So there must be a way for husks to recognize each other. Did they use their eyes or scent, or were they networked? The use of nanobots was illegal, but it's not as though Reapers were going to follow council accords. She combined her work into one datapad and headed to Morden to brainstorm. He studied the vids, listening to her as she paced and talked. What the hell are they, Morden? I've been bitten by them, definitely touched them. Not saying it was the most fun ever, but they don't seem to be infectious. How do they get this way? There have got to be different levels of indoctrination, different methods. Dragon's teeth for husks, the artifact for Dr. Kenson. She was gone mentally, but she looked fine and could speak and behave like a reasonable person, at least to cover her own tracks. What are the mechanisms and how do we detect them? Beyond that, how do we reverse them? Pretty sure we can't rebuild a husk into a human, but does Dr. Kenson still have enough function to revert back to who she was? Morden joined her in pacing. Victims still in quarantine, no communication. Alliance has them, would like to study. Unclear if artifact was recovered before the station detonated, would like access to their studies. Would like to examine dragon's teeth and a husk body. Under added precaution, of course. Nanobots troubling, but possible. Decontamination on Normandy may or may not detect and eliminate. As far as samples, we need to work on that. I can also get some data about keepers from the Citadel. They are also an example of biological Reaper tech. I know they weren't supposed to be scanned, but when I was on the SR-1, I spent some time running around gathering information on them. I'll forward it to you. I also need to figure out if all cargo does get properly decontaminated. Too easy to slip artifacts or bots through as mundane items since we haven't thought to look for them. I need to check and change security protocols. She paced a few more steps. I'll talk to Hackett, see if I can get you some access. When we head to Palaven, any bright minds there you can think to collaborate with? Amalis Kemi, brilliant Turian biologist. Always wanted to meet her. We sure we're dealing with biology? Morden shook his head. No, but final product resembles biology, maybe due to cellular mechanisms being hijacked. Must follow certain rules. She would know them. All right, I'll ask Garrus to contact her. Get me a list of what you want and any follow-ups. The collectors have been bioengineered, that's certain. Edie should still have the genetic scans. We've got some places to start. I hope that gives us some places to go. The sense of starting new projects, beginning new ties, helped overbalance that sense of it all coming to an end. She'd fortunately faced quite a few ends, including an unscheduled and unanticipated death. It seemed as though she should continue as though death didn't exist for her. At this point in her mission of going after Saren, her ship had been yoinked out from under her. This was better. She barely thought of the elusive man at this point. He had been reasonably unobtrusive and predictably almost mustache-twirling Machiavellian. Known entity. His attempt at mystery failed to fascinate her. If the camera revealed him tying someone to railroad tracks, she doubted she'd be surprised. Most of her recent work had very little to do with the direction he had sent her, other than building her team, and she'd had a long breather since the collectorship. She'd like to determine if that glaring blue-red star in the background during conferences was real or a simulation for misdirection. Couldn't hurt to do some triangulation in case he Machiavelled his way further into the minus column. So far they'd effectively used each other, but after this mission, she would not be cooperative. She could just imagine his thought process of using that backdrop. But I built this evil, secret base, and I just can't stay here without people knowing how evil and secret I am. Look at that damn star. That's just too damn cool. Witness the cool. He might be relatively easy to find based on his conceits. Maybe if she figured out his brand of cigarettes or what was in the tumbler, she could track him through luxury purchases or his tailor. She wasn't stupid enough to run the search from the Normandy, but she'd try someday maybe from Palaven or Ilium. For now, it simply looked like she could be a Cerberus proxy to legitimate governments. As long as she did her job and there were no more immediate surprises, she hoped to delay only briefly before heading to get the IFF. She doubted he would interfere. She'd develop a package of ongoing research and intel on whatever they were working on, and save a copy to be time delay released if they didn't return within a month. Delivered simultaneously to Liara, an STG contact of Morden's Alliance and Palaven destinations. She reviewed inventory versus the intended renovations, wondering how much they could squeeze in on Palaven, and making sure there were 2 months' worth of food for everyone on board. She pulled up a list of provisions and dove into the inventory system, spending hours making sure that things were where they said they were and were where they were supposed to be, tracing back through security and supplier lines. She asked Edie to take a particular interest in current and future inventory and report anomalies, considering those to be the weakest link in ship's security. She set up alert systems for any inconsistency to be reported. Everything was good. The ship was great. There had been no surprise space rats, wacky pijacks, or drug-smuggled bits found in the inventory. She'd resorted to physically spot-checking containers. She had no idea what a nanobot swarm containment system would look like, or a Reaper artifact. All she could report was that she didn't find anything resembling her concept of those things. She needed to tighten up her concept of those things. She ordered decontamination protocols on cargo that weren't already in place and bought some expensive thingamajabbers to ensure it could be done without a massive holdup and to a higher efficiency rating. Hopefully everyone was too scared of her OCD to fuck it up. She still didn't like the Citadel and wouldn't stay there overnight, but there was something she could do. She grabbed a blanket, a bag tossed with a snack and a drink, threw on a bikini with an oversized shirt over it, and anti-grav boots because physics. She did the heavy sunglasses thing and breezed through the CIC, went out through the airlock, and then up. The temperature in the Citadel and the fake sunlight was warming the Normandy's skin. She'd had no opportunities to commune with the outside of her. Spreading out a blanket and stripping off the shirt and boots, she lay back on the uneven plating, hands splayed out to either side to feel the warmed metal. The sounds of maintenance and construction on the Normandy and surrounding ships were the sounds of a living, working hive. We're gonna do it. And soon. We've both been torn up, and we've both come back. This time we're gonna get it done together. We've got a scary crew, but a good crew. Scary is what we need. She thought of Caden and wondered if he'd qualified for some good person afterlife she'd be barred from, or she'd leave herself due to boredom. I am not a good person, Caden. I wonder what you'd think of this mission. If you've got any pull up there, spare me a thought. I know you made your sacrifice free and clear, but I'm going to do everything I can to earn it. Part of this victory is yours. Part of every victory I've had is yours. She let her thoughts come and go, not getting caught in them. Like a river, she rose above. The sounds of the port and their remote industry were comforting. The sounds of work getting done. The murmur and sway of her own thoughts were the reassuring signs of an active, agile mind creating reflexive thought that she let ramble on its path without examination. She focused on isolating muscle groups, tensing and relaxing them. She made a circuit through her body, beginning at the head, working down to her toes, starting over until the warmth and repetition did their work and she fell still and quiet, and then seamlessly asleep. She woke and tried to get her bearings, opened her eyes and was startled into jumping. Thane was sitting by her feet, watching her. She closed her eyes against the prickling rush of adrenaline and said, "Okay, I'm awake now." He smiled and distinctly did not say he didn't intend to startle her. "Damn," she told him. "Fine. It freaks me out. Happy?" Thane inclined his head. "You have excellent control of your facial muscles, but not yet the subtle tightening of your jaw and neck when you are startled. And then there's the jumping." He nodded. "Understandable. You have less control over your responses when you first wake." She sat up partially, leaned back on her elbows and stretched out some of the knots of her shoulders. She had been relaxed before sleeping, but metal wasn't the most comfortable of surfaces. She asked him, "How did you find me?" He smiled. "I could say I had a way of tracking you in order to remain mysterious, but in this case I simply asked Edie." "That's a relief. You didn't implant a tracker on me while I was sleeping, did you?" He raised a brow ridge. "I had not thought of doing such a thing, but now that you have suggested it, I have not suggested it. Perhaps Garrus has considered it. I will ask him his thoughts. Yeah, you and I might already have trackers, given that possibility. She shifted to her right side, and he tilted subtly. When she moved back to the left side, he tilted more slowly back, but still distinct. What are you doing? The greatest likelihood of a sniper is from behind me. She closed her eyes. This is not how I would have wanted you to spend your shore leave. It is how I wanted to spend it. She raised a brow. What are the reasonable odds of a sniper? Less than a full percentage point, but I prefer to be useful. He pulled her feet into his lap, shifting her parallel to the vanishingly improbable bullet's path, covered by the protective shield of his back. Less than a percentage point. He knew he was not risking his life right now, but was willing to do it, would do it without question or recognition, content to watch over her while she slept. She felt kinship with the seemingly odd instinct. She always resisted sitting with her back to doors or windows, and there was usually less than 1 percentage point odds that anybody was going to start something through those doors or windows. But they still made her uneasy. She smiled at him and reclined, letting him control her position. She told him, "Thank you." His smile was subtle, and she was always delighted to see it. It transformed his face. Humor transformed his voice, and she loved those moments. His thumbs and palms worked on her feet. She groaned in appreciation and closed her eyes. After a few moments, she said, "I suck at small talk around you. I can't find a neutral topic. It's a challenge." Perhaps the weather. It's regulated. That's a short conversation. His fingers were working along her toes, the curves and arches of her feet, with her interspersed appreciation noises. Conversation requires context. Small talk often requires an innocuous, shared context that would create no social anxiety. I am afraid I lack that. I imagine it is more distressing to others than it is to me. What sort of context? Garrus has no difficulty with small talk because for each conversation in general, he will have context. You and he share military traditions, weapons, tactics, and you have also shared going to places together, drinking, vids. You both have a dynamic framework of context and shared experience. I am capable of researching and providing context when required by work, but at the moment there is no need for me to try to determine what your favorite vid or music is in order to share it and create a rapport that could lead to confidence. I have done it often for professional reasons. It could easily be considered manipulation. I have in fact avoided seeking some manufactured level of shared context. You and I have not had similar upbringings. I am less enthusiastic about my weapons of choice than Garrus. I do not drink, nor am I tempted to drink. I do not seek entertainment, but continued training and discipline in the tradition of a secretive culture. I have much less in the way of events in a life that blend together to form solid ground. My stories are not amusing or innocuous. My life was intended to be obscured, submerged, a series of long jumps from precarious footholds that sank below the sands once I passed on. The majority of my life is not a story that is mine to tell. The stories that do belong to me, by their nature they would invoke pity or disgust, possibly both. Not a desirable outcome. The urge to remain camouflaged is powerful and not without need. You appear to have confidence in me based upon my actions in the moment. Those actions must prove my worth and achieve the goal of allowing me to keep my status on the ship and at your side when you require or allow. I am hesitant to delve into those actions that may be interpreted as gaining facile acceptance. I believe you would see through them. I would find the attempt to assimilate at such an advanced point in my career to be unsustainable. It would be difficult for me to express genuine curiosity about you or Garrus and have a story to tell in order to reciprocate that would qualify as building rapport and not being manipulative. Both you and Garrus can be researched. Your lives are a continuous whole, solid ground of identity and action, constantly under public scrutiny. This is not to say everything is knowable, but enough is knowable to extrapolate. Part of my job when completing a contract is to not discuss it afterward as a professional necessity. To disclose the stories of my life would also be to acknowledge I do not have context for many of them. I did not realize how strange a thing it was to live the life I had led until I saw it side by side with other lives. Your life seems unfathomably strange to me, but admittedly fascinating. I find I wish to know everything about you, but I am unwilling to disclose my own history. She listened, soaking in the strength of his hands, the quiet and devastating honesty of his words, while still being, as he said, inescapably manipulative. She told him, I haven't asked questions because I don't want to intrude, not because I don't want to know. Sometimes my lack of curiosity is taken as not caring. I care. So having listened to what you've said, let me take a crack at the theories that dictate some of your observed behavior. Let me extrapolate. Tell me if I'm on the right track. I'm convinced we can build context, and if we do it non-verbally, we do it non-verbally. We have done it non-verbally. When you came to come find me, seeing me here sleeping, my assumption would be that your first instinct is not, she's charming when she's asleep, but that you likely see an overlay on my body, vulnerable points, the fastest way to kill me. I imagine you can't avoid seeing it, no matter the circumstances. You were trained to see bodies, see minds, as things that could be deconstructed, manipulated to your needs, and every time you look at me, you see how to kill me, how to manipulate me, as unconsciously as you might notice the color of my clothing. A reflexive calculation. You have no need to kill me, and that information is easily dismissed, thankfully of no more importance than the color of my clothing. Psychologically manipulating me, on the other hand, could be, and has been, very useful. Creating murkier motivation control. At a certain level of intelligence, you have to learn to not buy your own bullshit. So perhaps you question your motives often. Much of your social energy is consumed by generating and then suppressing instincts that were intended to save your life in a crisis. Your life has been a series of crises, and shutting off the instincts drilled into you as a child and practiced successfully as a profession is not an option You presented sitting where you're sitting as being useful. Much of your usefulness is intuitive and lightning calculated, and to countermand your instincts causes at least some level of distress. Distress you would bear without complaint, but still, distress. You would prefer I were in my cabin. Because if you see how you can kill me, and you know you will not, that is less anxiety than when you see very clearly how I could die, theoretically. And you can't unsee that. If you were Garrus, you would feel comfortable picking me up and moving me and not taking no for an answer. You are not Garrus. And you have a formality that makes doing that impossible unless there is a true and present danger you couldn't otherwise avoid. Knowing the potential for danger is there, you prefer to take action to protect me, transmuting the potential physical danger you perceive into something preventable, something you can control with a simple action to relieve the anxiety. All it would cost would be your life. And in the circumstances, you would barely consider that a cost, so much as an asset. This psychological manipulation you can do less about, because you see what would please me, what would please you, and you wish to do those things. You don't know where loving me ends, wanting me starts, and having control over me is irresistible. Loving you does not end, Messiha. She smiled at his acknowledgement and evasion, her eyes closed, bliss seeping into her through her feet, venom and companionship in the shape of his mind. She said, "You are endlessly charming. That is part of your problem, isn't it? I hear what you're saying as truth, but you know how easily you could lie. I seek you out. That on its own is unique. The permission to seek you out weighs on me as a responsibility as well as a right. Yes, I wish to touch you, but I also wish to behold you. I find you beautiful, which could be interpreted as objectifying you. I have seen people as objects for the majority of my life. I have seen you as the sum components of your physical and psychological exploitable weaknesses, as you say. Yet, as time passes, memories can take the place of threat assessment. I can see your throat reflexively as the most likely location to aim a strike, but I can also remember the moan you make when I kiss there, or remember the times the beat in your carotid has sped simply through seeing me. I am steadied in your presence. The anxiety of which you speak can be calmed through seeing you well, seeing you smile, seeing that my continued presence does you no harm, and hopefully provides benefit. I can calm anxiety in other ways, meditation or exercise or force of will. I prefer being near you, being available to you. There is no way to prove I would love you were you not so beautiful. You could not prove you would love me were I not as I am. Well, we are both involved with a frightening-looking, imposing, and scarred Turian. He is beautiful. Yes, he is. Without our inherent beauties, physical or psychological, what would be our worth to each other? Would you love me if I buffed the corridors of Zakera Ward? I should likely pray for the opportunity to prove I would, but I find myself occupied with loving you as you are now. An uncalculated moment may never come naturally, and you will see the struggle between my instincts, which I will not blunt because we both need them, and my wish to see you as a person. You are, however, the first person with authority over my future, who cares about what you can do for me as much, if not more, than what I can do for you. I did not truly think such a thing existed. Erica's ambition was to change me, redeem me somehow through the force of her will, but the force of my nature was stronger, and we reached an impasse of influence. She paid the price for that attempt at redeeming me. Here, the force of my nature is valued as it is. A large part of my training would prefer to dismiss that you care for me, to see your attentions as attempts to control my behavior. It would be reassuring. It is, in fact, reassuring that you are aware of the potential at your command. However, I know how to control behavior, and you paradoxically create loyalty through providing freedom. I do not know what to do with the freedom you offer, the freedom you wield so effortlessly. It is a twisting and unpredictable gift placed in my hands. I may never be able to grasp the concept of freedom, seeing traps and cynical hard facts in place of hope, seeing a gilded cage that is real simply because I would not lift a hand to escape it, and would fight to remain inside. In the end, it makes no difference if you have created the cage, locked it, or left it open, as long as I remain, reassured or suspicious of freedom. Freedom for now means I wish to be near you. Let that bring what it brings. The rest must wait for changing circumstance, habit, or the intervention of the gods to sculpt me. You volunteered to be placed on the chessboard, and as a commander I will certainly move you as I see fit, even sacrifice you. I am willing to sacrifice myself as well. I am the queen, but my job is to save the king. Do you know chess? He nodded. Not in enough depth to consider myself a master, but yes, I know of chess. You're a knight. You possess a pattern of movement that cannot be duplicated by another role. Your non-linear moves can create distraction on the board from the true intent. True enough, in that it is impossible for me to move forward without also moving sideways. I am content with being potentially sacrificed. I am not content with your willingness to sacrifice yourself. There we shall not agree. Do the Drell have a strategy game like chess? Yes. Pon Ifa. That game I do know in depth, sufficient to be considered a master. Would you teach me? Perhaps we could find further shared context over strategy. I have not been long in to expose you to the latest Blasto movie. In that case, shared context would not be of value. Some conversations are unnecessary and even antagonizing. Yes, I would enjoy that. I bought fruit for you, but I wouldn't try to cook it for you. That's a natural thing that humans might do for each other, but I wouldn't. I don't know why exactly, but I wouldn't presume. Is that a misguided instinct? I would like to do more for you, but you are so self-contained, self-sufficient, and disciplined, I feel I would be forcing you to accept something substandard. to please me. Perhaps as a small example, a story here would be illuminating. I will risk the pity and disgust. The strongest memories I have of my mother are of her preparing food and the scent of the house. When I was chosen for the compact, she was very proud. I spent a final month with my family, being praised each moment and being fed my favorites, fruit in elaborate syrups. She was adoring and indulgent, and I became very proud as a result. My father was more reserved, and I could see worry in his eyes, but my mother was pure enthusiasm. I embraced my mother's enthusiasm and determined my father was afraid of me because of the power he saw in me. I did not understand that he was afraid for me. I enjoyed his fear. Of course I did not understand, but I felt I did. I took my cue from my mother. That month was the last I saw of them. I was told to forget them as thoroughly as a drill could, that to invoke their memory would be to place them in danger, call the wrath of the gods down upon them, for the Hanar were now my only conduit to the gods. I could claim no ancestry. I belonged to the Hanar. The Hanar raised me to believe them to be literal heralds of the gods, reporting my progress to them, speaking on my behalf to gain their favor. To refuse their guidance would be blasphemy. Even now, there is a shadow of fear and restraint regarding even speaking of my parents. I know the mechanism. I know it was indoctrination and manipulation of a small and impressionable mind, but I cannot escape the fear it created. It has faded to, as you say, mild anxiety, but it remains. I have not dared to look to see if they still live. I had a younger sister whose face and laugh I recall, but I will not speak their names. To contact them now would disgrace them. I would have failed the compact, failed to protect Hanar interests. My training was effective. It carries through to me now. The boundaries were set, and the penalties were not only my personal failure, but a curse upon my family due to my negligence or tendency to boast or willingness to indulge in memories that no longer belonged to me. Empathy flooded her, but she kept her face relaxed, controlled, and he kept his eyes on her feet, on his hands. She would be contrary, again, and not give him pity or disgust, which was a manipulative but prophetic prediction. Upon entering the compound dedicated to my education, food was one of the first subjects of instruction. Having spent a month feeling as though I were the inherent and fated savior of the Drell legacy, I expected to be deferred to as my mother had done. I expected to be feared as my father had done. The reality was a locked room, isolation, and the systematic disillusion of those assumptions. Not simply disillusion, but dissolution. I had no family. I had no legacy. There was no deference. There was no fear. There was only instruction. There were no clocks. I was given simple, silent instruction, which I ignored my first day. I had been unaware that instruction was taking place as I explored the new space out of excitement. Instruction was repeated once a cycle. I do not know if it was a day or not. There were no windows. If instruction was not followed, there was a loud, blaring siren that would begin the moment of making an error and would continue until the end of the cycle. Understandably, my first day was spent in inattention, resulting in disobedience, and therefore noise, until the cycle ended and instruction was provided again. I was to examine and eat only the fruit provided, wait for it to ripen. I was to maintain my living space. I was to maintain my body. Simple instruction, suitable and possible for a 6-year-old. But there was to be no argument, no negotiation, no explanation, only demonstration and consequence. I did as I was instructed, or I was unable to sleep, unable to concentrate, possibly hungry or sick if I ate unripe fruit too early, or unexamined fruit that was likely treated with not fatal chemicals, but certainly ones that caused pain and distress. The noise would stop as the cycle began again, and I could attempt to follow instruction. Ultimately, there were days when I was able to sleep without a siren blare, or so exhausted I could in fact sleep through it. I formed habits out of necessity. She watched his face, neutral and detached, and she understood the need for distance. She barely breathed, not wanting to interrupt, a hole punched in her heart, bleeding internally for the child he had been. At the beginning, my only contact with another living being was the delivery of unpalatable raw and unripe fruit, supplemented with unknown capsules I took daily. Exercises were demonstrated, ablutions required, prayer forms to be executed. I do not know how long it took until the instruction became inherent, and I was able to leave that room. I always returned to sleep in that room if it was allowed, unless there was a training requirement that prevented it. The pattern became part of my daily actions, comforting, reassuring, and right. I had no opportunity to question or argue. I had no recourse to comfort myself with the idea that I would return to my family. I believed that thinking of them at all would be seen by the omnipresent divine messengers in the form of the Hanar, who would inform the gods, and we would all be punished. Me for my disobedience, the Hanar for failing to train me, my family for failing to create a child worthy of the compact. What remained was obedience. By the time I left that room, I no longer thought of my family. I only thought of the next action to be taken. I knew to only do as I was told. To take an unexpected route or explore on my own would result in traps and injury. I was shown that this would be the case. I did not attempt to explore. The siren was the most straightforward of deterrents. Beyond that, they became more subtle. I had been shown repeatedly in that room that food was always to be prepared by my own hand, that I would be tested on my comprehension, and transgression would provide their own punishments. By the time I was permitted to leave my room to attend further training, prepared food, often a remembered favorite, would be at my bedside when I woke, or in a hallway on my path. I never reached for it, even when presented as a reward. I had learned. She wanted to fucking kill every Hanar she'd ever met. Right now. She wanted to kill all the others that she hadn't met. She paced her breathing and relaxed her face muscles. Thankfully, he wasn't looking at her. The temptations never ended, and that pattern was repeated throughout my training. I embraced the discipline of preparing my food by hand, testing it for adulterants and poisons, catching items that had been poisoned, reinforcing that the action was necessary to my continued survival. My instruction was of value to me. Obedience resulted in slow but measurable improvements in my quarters and provisions. advancements in my instruction. I experienced hard-won status, silent pride, and usefulness. The weaknesses of temptation and temper fell away, and I was proud of how I was shaped, proud of my obedience. I would eat any food you offered me, Siha, even if I knew it was poisoned. You are correct. If I were to view food as others viewed it, there would always be a boundary I must cross, a boundary I would be unable to escape in its hold on me, and unable to explain. Shared context may be impossible when overwhelming previous context already exists and dictates behavior. There is no harm and, in fact, utility in my training regarding food. I eat what provides optimal health. Being of no harm cannot be said of much of the remainder of my training, but it costs me little to maintain its upkeep. I am not tempted to alter my habits in many ways. In fact, it would not occur to me that those habits could or should be altered. She thought about him saying he'd eat any fruit she offered him, even if he knew it was poison. What the actual fuck, Thane? I do not understand. I can't understand. You keep telling me this, and I keep thinking I can know you. I can't tell if your willingness to be poisoned is a lie or poetic declaration or truth, and I can't ask because I don't think you know either. I believe that you, Siha, like Garrus, were raised like a tree against strong, unpredictable winds from many directions. It made you strong. You have a straight and true trunk, deep roots, and a place of your own. You know your opponents, and you have expelled them and held your own shape. In contrast, I was raised from a sapling to wrap around a twisted set pole, imbalanced and unsustainable without the support of that pole. Wind from only one direction, unnatural. I knew no soil as my own. Remove the pole whole, and I would be torn apart. Remove it in segments, and my twisting will ever echo its shape. I will never grow straight. My roots will never be any pattern but shallow and thirsty, while denying all existence of that thirst by action or thought, while revering shallow as the best shape to hold. She thought, No, don't be true. That's a terrible image, and poetic and final, and I won't let it be true. I carry the shape the Hanar intended. I will only appear to be straight or true through artifice. I can know I once had the potential to grow straight and true. I can now see that growing straight and true is not impossible, though my mind still tries to grasp it. I see it in you, in Garrus, in Karen Shakwas, in others that can shoot fleet as an arrow with straight shaft along their chosen path. I had earlier thought that my shape was superior. Now I begin to see the difference, even if I do not understand fully. It could create despair, or it could simply be what it is. I choose to accept that my opportunity for that growth, that formative time, is lost, and I can only bear the fruit I was raised to bear, hold the shape I was raised to hold. My personal pride in my past has been replaced by pity and disgust. I do know the shape I bear can be of service to you as a knight on the board. In my life with Erica, there was no board, no game, no purpose except to see where my shape differed so entirely and insidiously from others. In that time, I attempted to change. I was unable to, despite a soul-deep motivation to do so. I cannot and will not change, so I choose to be useful. You comprehend my twisting without being told. You value my potential on the board. It is enough, Siha. More than I had hoped to achieve. What is new beyond the loss of my manufactured pride is maintenance of the least damaging of the traditions I was taught, the habits I won at great cost. I face my future with humility and with the dawning understanding of how love can make my days, my limited choices my own, and I can learn in my stumbling way what freedom is. My pride will not permit me to return to the natural understanding and selfishness of a mistaken 6-year-old. Begin again. Try new ways with no warnings to keep me away from danger. I had a way of living that would always provide the correct answer. I no longer follow that path. Now I am free to make mistakes. However, I am further along a path I know well than many others have been able to travel, and I can wield those truths well. I will not begin again. I will not be made anew. My time of growth is past, but I will be of use. She was roiling with anger, and yes, pity, and yes, disgust, as she said, "They should be stopped. That should not have happened to you. It should not happen to another child." It has occurred to me, too, end the compact. But I am only one man, and bound by it myself. My people would not permit the loss of their pride. They would cling to it, recreate it. Had I full freedom and power, however, I would wipe it from existence. You see what you see in me, and I accept that. I accept that you know how to kill me, and you know how to manipulate me. If you can forgive or admire me for playing chess with our lives, you should know that, yes, I will see things in you. I may feel pity or disgust or horror from your stories. But just as you can look at my throat and begin to see beyond it as a strike point, I can learn about you and see past what was to what is. You have asked me to see myself through your eyes. I ask you to see yourself through my eyes. Ask me questions, tell me stories. Share what you can of your life with me. Trust that if I can't understand, I can try. And trying matters. I may not always succeed in understanding, but I will always try. And I will always love you. I value you beyond your utility. If you chose in this moment to stay on the ship, but take no more life, engage in no more manipulation to get what you want, but to ask for what you want, you deserve that freedom. I don't have to give it to you. You can take it, and I would respect that. His hands stilled on her feet and then withdrew, leaving tingling and warmth and invigorated blood flow. His head tilted forward, and his dark eyes, with the patient and knowing smile on his face, made the hair stand up on her arms. He pulled the blanket under her slowly until she was dragged to him, and he gathered her into his lap, arranged her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck. He smoothed his hands over the risen hair, the warning her body had given her, and he had seen. He raised her chin with his fingers, buried his other hand in her hair, and studied her face. There is nothing short of death that will stop me from following you, from killing those who threaten you. You will not stop me. You would have to kill me, and instead you have granted me greater vigor, longer life to follow my chosen path. You have granted me enough freedom for me to choose my own path. My chosen path is you. You imagine some light from within me that casts such deep shadows, some light you hope to reveal. The light is you, Jane, and I am now your twisted shadow. There is no turning back or turning aside. There is forward motion and sideways motion. You will play chess, and I will play pawn e4, and we shall see. Just as Garrus would never have returned to Palavan command after following you in battle, neither shall I retire to Kaje to teach flower arrangements. Set that thought aside as incomplete understanding. Her smile was full and appreciative as she told him, You already have Garrus under your control. A few choice words, and he would follow your commands, not mine. Particularly because he would want to if it saved my life. He didn't deny it, and his smile became more full and appreciative. We shall see, my queen. For now, the simple truth is I have no machinations beyond wishing to sit at your feet, watch you sleep, and replace flash-true images of death and manipulation with more thoughtful alternatives. A full and painless breath drawn in your presence, in the light, offering myself as your unasked and indeed unshakable protector, is as straight and true as I can be. Stay with me a while, Sia, and bring me peace. For now we are not pieces on a board, but the minds surveying it, and no move must be made. We have the luxury of stillness. He shifted her so her head was on his shoulders, his lips in her hair. His hands traveled down her arms to entwine his fingers with hers. Whatever peace he could gain, she wanted to give. She fell into uncomprehending silence, her shift in perceptions of him resolving into the conclusion that she did not understand. His mind was contemplating the danger, his back to it, the shadow from his presence and intent cast over her, inescapably protective and menacing. It could create despair, or it could simply be what it was. She knew he had mixed his metaphors. If the darkness was behind him, his knowledge of danger was relative illumination as it had been regarding Bahak. He was a map of the darkness, and he would lead her out, not in. He was and was not as deeply corrupted as he believed, and he was as prone to seeing weakness in himself as she was to seeing it in herself. She did not know how she knew, but she knew. Their eyes looked accurately out, not in. She chose the luxury of silence and not striving to comprehend. She would set her intuitive knowledge of him against his intuitive knowledge of himself and see what came. She had his hands in hers. She had the skin of the Normandy under them, the warmth and light of the peaceful and generated sky, the sounds of ships being made whole. Metaphorical light and shadow moves and rolls, faded. A full and painless breath had been impossible months ago. She would work on buying them enough time to make miracles. And if he had no hope, she would hold it for him until he could reach for it himself.